PlayStation 5 has been out for over 2 years now. There have been some games that have utilized the new allotted power in interesting ways. Load times have become largely non-existent in most newer games. Render distances in the PS5 versions are sharp and without loss of quality. 2022 felt like the console's true first year. We got a consistent release schedule containing a good variety of experiences. The first 2 years, however, Sony found themselves in what felt like a long transition period. Games that were originally developed with only the PS5 in mind were then being transitioned to also support the PS4. Games that were built for the PS4 but launched years into the PS5's lifecycle came with remnants of last-gen tech. Nothing that will hurt your experience, but still there nonetheless. Not all games require using the PS5's full power. Groundbreaking or moving experiences come in many forms, art styles, musical compositions, and writing. Many games have launched in the last 2 years that are moving the needle. 2023 looks to be the year that Sony delivers on the PS5's ability that we haven't seen used at its full potential yet. Final Fantasy XVI was first announced in its Awakening trailer during a PS5 showcase in September of 2020. It was a rare showing for a mainline Final Fantasy game. In these situations, we're used to seeing a very well-produced trailer contained within the bounds of mostly CGI. The release was still 3 years away. We were instead treated to fully in-game visuals. The in-game visuals looked fantastic even today, but Yoshi P and Creative Business Unit 3 were also working within the confines of the PlayStation 4. The general consensus at the time was that while the game looked to be returning Final Fantasy to its roots in setting, the game still looked like a very high-end product of the 8th generation of consoles. Under different circumstances, it could have leaned closer to what we would see in the multiple trailers that followed once development plans had been cemented. 2020 Creative Business Unit 3 was still within the generation transition purgatory. It wasn't until later where it was decided it would be a PS5 only title, and many aspects of the game were then shifted in that direction. Yoshi P mentioned that he didn't want to pre-render the first trailer as it would have been a waste of development time. 2 years later, in 2022, Yoshi P was asked what opportunities developing on the PS5 afforded him that were not previously possible on last-gen's hardware. He mentioned, "With the boost in processing power, we can obviously make the graphics even richer than we could before, but it's the super fast loading times that really impress me. In Final Fantasy XVI, you jump straight from story cutscenes into real-time battles and back again without any loading times, making the gameplay flow at a breakneck pace. It's only thanks to the power of the PlayStation 5 that we can make Final Fantasy XVI the roller coaster ride that it is." Narrative-driven games come in many forms. In the form Final Fantasy XVI is taking, there is a lot of competition. Every edge that can be taken should be. Switching it to a full current generation title is the necessary step needed for it to be better than the games coming out around it. Going from cutscenes directly into combat is something that has been made possible even in the last generation. However, Final Fantasy XVI has a much different nature of how you can go from cutscene into gameplay. Clive being able to take the form of the icon of Freak creates unique combat transition scenarios that are much more scalable on current gen. Yoshi P quotes, "The overall game design for these icon versus icon battles, however, is meant to be unique, and in fact, we don't actually use the same exact system twice. Each battle is completely unique in its playstyle, and so we're doing something that's kind of crazy. In-game boss fights against dominance function in stages where they begin as what feels like a standard fight, as you slowly transition into your icon form where the fight changes into a multitude of different gameplay mechanics depending on which dominant you're fighting. It's in this where the effectiveness of its delivery could be compromised if you're still having to cater to dated hardware." Naoki Yoshida took the stage during the 2022 Game Awards to showcase the release date trailer for Final Fantasy XVI titled Revenge. In the preceding trailers, we've not gotten to see much of our protagonist Clive, but in the Revenge trailer we got that and a much better look of just why Final Fantasy XVI had to drop last generation hardware. The graphical fidelity on display is some of the most exciting we've seen in the last 2 years. Not only just texture quality, but the art style and use is one that's refreshing. Square Enix with Final Fantasy has a way of creating their characters within a style where they're believable looking people without treading into photorealism. they are still very much stylized. It adds to that unspoken feeling the games have provoked for decades. Those familiar with the environment Final Fantasy XVI has been developed within have become very aware of what Creative Business Unit 3 has been capable of under Naoki Yoshida's leadership. Giving a single-player mainline Final Fantasy title to this team built from the ground up for PS5 with some of the best action combat designers in the world is an easy bet. With talent from the Kingdom Hearts team assisting and the combat designer for Devil May Cry 5 leading, the gameplay is looked at internally as a culmination of the company's past experiences, and it shows. It truly is the transition of cutscenes into gameplay where major parts of the experience can be amplified using PS5 tech. Final Fantasy games have been getting better at this for years. Final Fantasy XV found fun ways to do this in many moments of the journey. Some very successfully because of the scale of the fight,
Nice one. It's not over yet. Ready for round 2. Bring it.
and some that momentarily falter due to the game's load needing a bit more time in between phases, combined with a massive encounter. Seven Remake made even bigger strides with immersion in and out of fights. It's not just simple cuts at the end of the scene that immediately throw you into the action. It's being able to swap from cutscenes into gameplay in a way that makes these instances feel like one continuous moment versus removing you. Final Fantasy XVI looks to have many massive encounters with a scale not yet seen at this graphical fidelity in the series or often in gaming. These having to be scaled in the opposite direction could have been the difference from 16 being a great game or an unforgettable one. The next generation of games finally feel like they're approaching with the fast incoming release of Final Fantasy XVI. It's an exciting time to finally get to see what Creative Business Unit 3 can pull off with a from the ground up current gen game with no bounds. We all know what they have been able to do within them. If there was ever a time to turn your attention towards a game, it's this one.